probably the most anthologized and most commonly known poem Walt Whitman ever wrote is one he seems to have dashed off a little cynically. It's his most uncharacteristic. It is "O Captain, My Captain." He wrote this for a magazine, for a little promotion, presumably. This is a contest, I believe, about eulogizing the fallen president. And so he writes this. He never mentions Lincoln's name itself, but the imagery is fairly obvious. "Oh, Captain, my Captain, our fearful trip is done. The ship has weathered every wreck. The prize we sought is won." It's a clear symbolism. Lincoln is the captain. The ship is the ship of state, having gone through the war, and the prize you sought, the winning of the war, is won. And then, tragically, just as they near port, when it's almost over in April of 1865, the port is near, the bells I hear, the people all exulting, while follow eyes the steady keel, the vessel grim and daring. But oh, heart, 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 oh, the bleeding drops of red, where on the deck my captain lies, fallen cold and dead. Now that rhapsodic voice that he adopts for this is a throwback to his romantic era, when he was much more under the influence of the Romantics, and it's a time of transition where it's the romantic poetry is becoming realism, and he has gone through these stages, and he's comfortable in each voice. What is significant here is the marriage of this romantic spirit, where he's seeing it's not Lincoln, he is already making him an image, a symbol, but it is the marriage. What's interesting to me, at least, is the marriage of the romantic voice with something prosaic, which is politics. He is largely talking about national politics, the ship of state, the bringing through the terrible war. There is, it's leaning very hard in one direction. I do not think it is Whitman's greatest poem by any stretch, but it's taking romantic means to something that is essentially common, that is recognizable, that is on a very specific level political, and it's matching romanticism with something very mundane. It's taking, obviously, a very poetic, rhapsodic view of it. The echoing of the lines, fallen cold and dead, the dog trot rhythm of it, the O's, oh, exult, oh shores, and ring, oh bells, but I with mournful tread, that little I with mournful tread, that little reversion of syntax is artly poetic. Walk the deck, my captain lies, fallen cold and dead. It's very mournful. It is clearly designed for popular consumption, and it's effective for what it is. So give him credit for that. But the sister piece of this, the one he also wrote in the days following, or weeks following, the death of Lincoln, one that he's clearly spent a little bit more time with, and clearly brought his particular voice to bear in more specifically and more productively, I would say, is "When Lilacs Last and the Dooryard Bloomed." This is a beautiful elegy for the fallen leader, where he's dealing with so many different levels at once. It is about Lincoln, but it's about much more than Lincoln, and it's a It actually knits together the nation in a way that perhaps is only matched by Lincoln's second inaugural speech. When lilacs last in the dooryard bloom, and the great star early drooped in the western sky in the night, I mourned, and yet shall mourn with ever-returning spring. Ever-returning spring, Trinity sure to me you bring, lilac blooming perennial and drooping star in the west, and thought of him I love. That's Whitman. With the free verse, there is no discernible meter. It's just ordinary, common speech of ordinary, common human beings. It's elegiac. It's centered on him and how he feels. He looks out at nature and reflects about how it makes him feel. He looks at the lilacs and he looks up at the sky and he sees and he feels mournful. So lilacs are a delicate flower, they're going to pass. The great star early drooped in the western sky in the night. Time is falling, it is turning into darkness. It is a sense of loss, all packed in. Ever returning spring, Trinity sure to me you bring, lilac blooming perennial and drooping star in the west, and thought of him I love. Again, the hymn is a little bit conspicuous there because there is no name. Now, you can jump into this and say, well, since this is couched in the section of Leaves of Grass called Memories of President Lincoln, you can say, well, him, it's Lincoln. He loved the president. He was an ardent fan of Abraham Lincoln, and so Lincoln is passed, and this is a memory of him. But it can be so much more. Thought of him I love. It's almost like the poet does not want to, the narrator, however you want to couch this, does not want to speak the name because the name itself is so painful. So you use a pronoun first. The pronoun is a substitution for the noun that you don't want to say for one reason or the other. And this is conspicuous. Generally you use pronouns after you have already established the person, so it's a clear reference. But when you have a pronoun that refers to nothing in particular, it's a question. And now it's a tease, and it gets you to lead on because he's leading that very directly in that last line, in the last couple of syllables of that line. So it charges you into the next stanza. Just lead on by curiosity, because who I love. Maybe we're gonna get some good stuff here. There is that resonance. It can be so much more. It doesn't make clear. It might be Lincoln, it might be someone else, but it invites you to step in and speculate a little and experience that. Because we may not have all mourned for President Lincoln and felt devastated by his loss, but we have all mourned for a pronoun of our choice. And that shares it. That opens it up and makes it universal, and everybody can have a little buy-in there. And Whitman is always about opening it up so that everybody can experience it. It's not for the select few who may or may not have been fans of Lincoln. Remember, there were an awful lot of people who did not like Abraham Lincoln at this particular point in time. Half the United States of America did not like Lincoln. Lincoln very clearly tried to address this himself in the second inaugural, in the Gettysburg Address, but here we have Whitman trying to do roughly the same thing, trying to open it up, to bring everybody in and embrace as a as a whole nation once again embrace this figure as a loss and identify it as a loss. The poem goes on. It's a fairly long poem. It's not as long as by any stretch, but it's very well developed. And it goes through discussing the lilac, discussing a bird. You have the bird, you have the lilac, you have these images of death and time passing, and this haunting sense of loss throughout. Coffin that passes through lanes and streets day and night, with the great cloud darkening in the land, with the pomp of the enloped flags and the cities draped in black, with the show of the states themselves as of the crape-veiled women standing, with processions long and unwinding and flambeaux of the night, with the countless torches lit and the silent seas of faces and their unbared heads, with the waiting depot, the arriving coffin, and the somber faces, with dirges in the night, with the 1,000 voices rising strong and solemn, with all the mournful voices of the dirges poured around the coffin, the dim-lit churches and the shuddering organs, where amid those you journey, with the tolling, tolling bells' perpetual clang, here, coffin that slowly passes, I give you my sprig of lilac. Now, this is the funeral procession of Lincoln. They held ceremonies in Washington, D.C. He was laid out in state. They put his coffin on a train, and the train traveled up the eastern seaboard and through a bunch of states and a lot of towns. And in these towns, the coffin was laid out in so it was visible on a passing train, and people would come and essentially attend the funeral, pay their respects by standing by the train track and watching it pass by. And this went on for quite some time. The train was not traveling particularly fast, so they had some time to see it go by. And this was bringing together all the people, primarily through the north. It was traveling from Washington to his resting place in Springfield, Illinois. And it was passing through, and people were showing up to pay their respects. And this in itself becomes a symbol of unity, of people coming together as they do in funerals. They may have had, every family has differences and factions and frustrations with one another, but when one of them passes, we all go and pay our respects, and that's what's going on here. And here, Whitman is participating in that by declaring himself as the poet, as the narrator, of going and honoring Lincoln and his passing train coffin, and presenting this sprig of lilac, which symbolizes something. We're not totally sure just yet, but you get a sense of this is the feeling of loss that he is internalizing here, and he wants to share that with Lincoln, with the body of Lincoln, with the train, with the procession of the train. Whitman loves trains, he loves processions, he loves parades, but it's more, I would say, he is sharing his sense of loss, which I think the lilac really symbolizes, his sense of loss with the nation as this train passes through all these little towns and big cities. It was a remarkable event as it made its way. They held parades for him in major cities. There was a major parade traveling down, I think, Fifth Avenue or Broadway in New York City, where they would take time, and thousands and thousands of people would line up just to pay their respects. It was a sign of the shock and the loss that happened here. We had other presidents die in office, but usually of natural causes. This is an assassination, and coming after the trauma of a war, It was just when you feel so high, as everybody in the North probably did, that, okay, the war is finally over, we won, yay! But just at that ending, they suffer a loss, a significant loss, a real shock, that the voice that had held them together as a nation was now silenced. And Whitman is paying tribute to that. They come on, amid all of this, he is weaving in a bird, more nature imagery, a bird that sings. Sing on there in the swamp, O singer bashful and tender, I hear your notes, I hear your call, I come presently, I understand you. But a moment I linger, for the lustrous star has detained me, the star my departing comrade holds and detains me. Sing. The bird sings, a poet sings. He feels somehow torn between this image of a lonely voice singing in a murky swamp, nature, but one that's somehow dark. He identifies with it, and he repeats that, I hear your notes, I hear your call, I come presently, I understand you. That insistence of the I that Whitman loves, but that identifies and personalizes it and saying, I hear you. So this is many different things, I would say. This is the spirit of poetry itself. He is perhaps feeling a calling to his vocation as a poet. He is perhaps identifying his artistic spirit in this bird, and he wants to go and follow it, although he feels obligated to pay more heed to Lincoln, and he's torn between these two impulses. How shall I warble myself for the dead one there I loved? How shall I deck my song for the large, sweet soul that has gone? And what shall my perfume be that for the grave of him I love? He feels obligated, and he wants to sing a song for Lincoln. Whitman is here saying, how do I do this? He's struggling to process the emotions and the feelings in a very normal, natural way, completely unlike the very processed feelings and pro forma sense that you get from "Oh Captain, My Captain." But he's really struggling. Like, I don't know if I can sing this song. It's another declaration of poetic humility. It's kind of a pose very often among poets who say, I don't know if I have the talent or the skills to do this justice. But in the process, they're actually doing it. So it's a little disingenuous sometimes. Here, you get the sense that it's so intimate, so personal, that there is, it seems quite sincere, to me at least. I don't know. The sing on, you gray-brown birds, sing from the swamps, the recesses, pour your chant from the bushes, limitless, out of the dusk, out of the cedars and pines. Sing on, dearest blutter, warble your reedy song, loud human song, the voice of uttermost woe. O liquid and free and tender, O wild and loose to my soul, O wondrous singer, you only I hear, yet the star holds me, but will soon depart, yet the lilac with mastering odor holds me. Here you can see him flipping back and forth, or not even, but weaving back and forth between these two modes of the realist and the romantic, because he's ticking off all of these very specific details of nature. The bird is gray-brown. The swamps, the recesses, out of the cedars and pines, warble your reedy song. Reedy is not a romantic, particularly adjective. It's a very realist adjective. You get a sense of, well, okay, this isn't Keats's Nightingale. This is something a little bit more thin and tinny, perhaps. But within that, he is taking that very realist image of nature, and he is drawing inspiration from it. He is finding the beauty within it that perhaps goes unnoticed by others. He is he's struggling to find beauty in the world, even in tragedy. On so many levels, you can see that working with the passing of Lincoln. And again, the star is dropping in the night. He is watching as all this going on. He is observing nature itself, marking the passage of time. Nature itself moving time forward, even as he wants to stay and just indulge his mourning a little bit more. When time goes on and it takes you further and further away from the time that the past loved one was alive. So each minute ticks by as distance, and it's heartbreaking. Passing the visions, passing the night, passing unloosed with the hold of my comrade's hands, passing the song of the hermit bird and the tallying song of my soul, victorious song, death's outlet song, yet varying, ever-altering song, as low and wailing, yet clear the notes, rising and falling, flooding the night, sadly sinking and fainting, and warning, and yet again bursting with joy. Covering the earth and filling the spread of the heavens, in that powerful psalm in the night I heard from recesses passing. I leave these lilacs with heart-shaped leaves. I leave thee there in the dooryard, blooming, returning with spring. I cease from my song for thee, from the gaze on thee in the west, fronting the west, communing with thee, I, comrade lustrous, with silver face in the night. Yet each to keep in all retrievements out of the night, the song, the wondrous chant of the gray-brown bird, and the tallying chant, the echo aroused in my soul, with the lustrous and drooping star, with the countenance full of woe, with the holders holding my hand, nearing the call of the bird, comrades mine, and I in the midst, and their memory ever to keep. For the dead I love so well, for the sweetest, wisest soul of all my days and lands, for this and for his dear sake, lilac and star and bird twined, the chant of my soul, there in the fragrant pines, and the cedars dusk and dim. He's trying to process all these emotions. He's trying to process his own personal sense of loss. He's trying to process the sense of loss of the nation. He's trying to process the image of passing time. He's trying to process the image of the passing train going by. He's trying to process all of this, and it's all bound up. And so when he says that, the lilac and star and bird twined in the chant in my soul, this is what he's saying. It's all coming out as his chant, as his poem. This poem, every poem he's ever written, as his spirit as a poet, this is him making himself a kind of almost sacrificial lamb that he's taking on the mourning of the entire nation for this, and offering up his experience of pain to that nation as a kind of avatar of grief. And it's typically egocentric on Whitman's part, but it's also somewhat generous, and it's an embrace. He's not looking to replace any of the other people. He's looking to take them all within himself, basically to embrace the world and take on their pain. Not unlike Christ, quite honestly, but in a very secular, very natural way, that he doesn't really want to go anywhere near theological concerns here, religious concerns. He wants in this poem, and for my money, it's really his most beautiful. He wants in this poem to take his pain and share it so that we can all experience both the pain and the beauty of the pain in this moment of national grief, world grief.